This is the Building Automation Monthly Podcast with Phil Zito, episode 146. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 146 of the Building Automation Monthly Podcast. And if you've never listened to us before, welcome to the Building Automation Monthly Podcast. Each week we discuss a topic related to building automation that you will not hear discussed anywhere else. And for those of you who are repeat listeners, welcome back. In this episode, we are going to be discussing account management. We're going to talk about how to manage and grow your accounts. Now, some of you may be thinking, I'm not in sales. I don't have any accounts. I don't know what I'm going to take from this episode. And I want to stop that thinking right now, because I will tell you, if you're a technician, if you're an engineer, heck, if you're even an operator, understanding how to properly manage accounts, to manage expectations, how to build around the specific needs for wherever you're working or whoever you're working with is an invaluable skill. I will tell you, for the technicians and operators and engineers who know how to do this, they literally can write their own ticket to any job they want. And for those of you who are on the sales side of things, well, it's just a foregone conclusion that you need to know how to manage and grow accounts, because the old way of simply responding to plan and spec work and just bidding it up and hoping you're low is becoming increasingly more difficult now that there are so many products that can be openly procured on the market and the competition level is so high. So what is account management and why does it matter to you? Well, account management is the act of identifying an account, whether that be a specific building or a set of buildings or an engineering firm, and then managing the relationship with that account as looking at it from a perspective of growing that account, making sure that you increase the quality and sometimes quantity of work that comes from that account, but also making sure that you are serving that account, making sure that you are understanding the mission of that account, and then that you are serving the people within that account with solutions to their business problems. So predictable building automation business ultimately comes from two areas, and that's new construction and major retrofits and service work. Now, the trick to developing a predictable, profitable, growable business, which if that doesn't sound familiar to you, go back and listen to episode 145, because episode 146 actually piggybacks on top of some of the concepts we covered in episode 145. So the trick to developing that predictable, profitable, growable business is practicing account management. Now, here's the deal. Unless you've worked for a major manufacturer, you probably haven't been taught, formally at least, what account management is. So how do you do account management? Well, we're going to get right into it with my 6-step process. That's like a tongue twister right there. 6-step process for practicing account management. Now, the first step is deciding on your primary business approach. So understanding, are you going after plan and spec work? Are you going after design build? Are you going owner direct? Are you doing spec influence? What is your primary business approach? I will argue that you can't be effective at multiple approaches. In order to have true mastery, you can have maybe 2, maybe 3 approaches that you are really, really good at, but to go after owner work, but also do contracting, but also do design build, and also do P3 projects, and also do spec influence, but also do systems integration. I mean, in order to do those well, you really have to have some deep subject matter expertise on those areas. You can't call yourself a system integrator and then not even know what a BACnet protocol is and be going and trying to actually build a smart building. That's a recipe for disaster, I will tell you that much. Unless you've got millions of dollars of money to throw at sales pursuits and you've got an entire team backing you up. But most of you out there don't have that. So you've got to decide on what your primary business approach is. I would recommend, as restrictive as it may seem, picking one and then focusing on that area for a good solid year to 3 years. I know that sounds like a long time, but I really think that folks underestimate what they can do in 5 years and overestimate what they can do in 1 year. I've heard that quote somewhere. I don't really remember where it comes from, so I can't give credit to whoever came up with that quote, but I found it to be true in my business as well as in some of the customers that I do consulting work for. Now, step 2 is to analyze your customers that fit into that primary business. Now, once you have customers, assuming you have customers that fit into that primary business approach, I mean, in an ideal world, you would go and you would focus on your existing customers that fit into that primary business. In some cases, you may make a pivot to a different primary business, but ideally, it's best to start off where you already have customers. So analyzing these customers and understanding, why did they buy? Why did they buy from you? Was it price? Did you have a relationship with someone? Why did they buy? And then who bought? So who bought from them? And then who bought from them multiple times? Is there a single person? Did they make purchase by committee? All of this is really important for you to understand how this primary business buys. Now, this may be specific to a single account, or this may be specific to a vertical. You may find that you service a couple different school districts and they all tend to buy the same way, the school board or a VP of construction, etc. Now, on top of who bought, who did you influence? Because most often, while there is a decision maker, there's also people who influence that decision maker. So who did you influence and who made the decision? You really need to understand this about the accounts that you manage, because you can spend quite a lot of time trying to influence or trying to woo over someone who will not make a decision. Now, I promised early on in this episode that this would be applicable to technicians. This would be applicable to operators. And you may be thinking to yourself, okay, how is this applicable to me? Well, quite often as a technician or as an operator, you need to influence some form of change, whether it's that some sort of upgrade needs to happen because it's just not good for the customer to be running off of 1940s technology in a critical care hospital. Or maybe you've been trying to get more resources for your operations team, but you just can't seem to get ahead. This is where understanding the folks within your business, who make decisions and who can you influence and how can you influence them. Once you understand this, then you're able to go and impact your business, which moves us to step 3. Now that we've identified a primary business within that business sector, maybe it's plan and spec work, maybe it's design build work, maybe it's a specific vertical. Now we want to dive a little deeper and we want to understand who our most profitable repeat customers are. Now, it's really key that we focus in on profitable and repeat, because we can have profitable customers that we could never repeat. We just landed a lucky job. The customer really didn't understand what they were buying, and we were able to get away with 40% margin on the job. Not that I ever recommend that, but the reality is that does happen. So who is profitable and a repeat customer? So who's bought multiple times, who was profitable, and most importantly, why were they profitable? If you find that the same salesperson is handling this account and the reason they're profitable is that this person keeps underestimating the jobs and eventually the person's going to get pissed off because they're not getting a full system, that's completely different. Then they are profitable because of the level of the relationship that is in that account is letting them bypass the contracting tier, or is letting you bypass the contracting tier and letting you make more profitable estimates. And then who had repeat business? Who was it that you did repeat business with? You really need to identify this, and you need to focus in then on step 4, which is mapping out your top 5 customers. You need to understand what their organizational structure is. You need to understand who buys, How much can they buy and how do they buy? Do they buy by committee? Do they have a capital allocation or do they have an operational allocation? When is their budgeting? How do they budget? All of these things you should understand and you should be influencing, but you should also understand who else is influencing. And how are they influencing? Are they influencing budget requirements? Are they influencing technology? Do they have technology preferences? I know I'm throwing so much out at you right now, but it's really important that you be able to understand and answer all of these questions. It is critical to you being able to really dominate whatever your primary business is. You have to be able to answer these questions. I will tell you, having worked with several top-tier salespeople at the enterprise level, they are able to answer these exact questions about their accounts. And then finally, we want to understand with our top 5 customers, what is their purchasing pattern? Do they come up with a budget in January and purchase in July? Do they come up with a budget in July and purchase in December? What do they do when they have excess cash? How do you know if they have excess cash? What are they willing to accept if they don't have cash? Are they willing to take credit? Are they willing to do some form of guarantee? Understand what their purchasing pattern is. Now that you've done this, we move on to step number 5, which is to create a plan to grow your knowledge. So while understanding all this information is good, there's still a lot of information that you need to understand about these top 5 customers or accounts. First, you need to identify any hidden influencers. This is especially true in specialty vertical markets like healthcare, higher ed, some corporate customers will as well have hidden influencers. These are folks like the cybersecurity group, the IT group, the clinical group, who can all have special requirements and can have influence over the selection of you for a project. You need to identify any hidden capital or operational funds. IT and IP controls are all the rage right now, and there is access to hidden capital as well as operational funds. And something a lot of folks don't realize is that IT groups are very comfortable with operational budgets. They're very comfortable with subscription services and renewable costs. So that is a way in which you can soften the upfront cost of your projects by coming up with some form of extended costs that is based on a monthly or quarterly basis. You need to identify the capital plan. How is an organization getting capital? What is it tied to? What is dependent on them getting capital? Can you help them? And can you influence the allocation of that capital to your projects? Are there certain groups within the organization that make decisions as to what projects get what capital? Identify any strategic growth or shrink goals. Now, I really want to focus in on this one because a lot of folks don't think through this. They think through the strategic growth goals, but also shrink goals. There may be a desire to automate and reduce labor within the organization. Now, you need to be careful about how you approach this, but if your technology solution is able to automate the tasks that they're already utilizing people to do, that is something you need to be aware of. A lot of folks don't like to talk about this. I remember I was on a pursuit for an analytics sale, and the operations manager pulled me aside and said, "Look, we really like your analytics, but the guys are scared that this is going to replace them." And he said, to be honest, I could see it replacing them because they're not really doing their job right now. So his desire was to shrink his operational team. He just didn't know how to do it. And if we'd been able to find a way to do that, then he would have been willing to potentially engage in that. And finally, you need to be able to lay out their corporate structure. Ideally, you want to work as high as possible to get the outcomes you want, but no higher. I know everyone's get to the top, but in reality, making all the effort to get to the top just to get pushed back down to a specific person, it seems like a lot of effort for not a lot of return. The better way to do it, in my experience, is to work up to the level you need to be at and identify the hidden influencers and make sure you have those covered as well. And finally, step 6. Actually, I just realized I'm looking at my notes here and I said 6-step process, but there's actually 7 steps in this process. So you'll have to forgive me for that. I just realized that as I'm going through the notes. This is what happens when you write notes for your podcast while you're driving. So here we go. And no, I wasn't driving. My wife was driving, but nonetheless. So step 6, create a plan to grow your influence. Now, within each account, you need to identify the top 5 capital or operational projects. For each project, you then want to identify the decision maker. You want to identify the influencers, identify the funding source, and identify anything that could kill off the project. Now, your goal is to make sure you've got the decision maker covered as well as the influencers. Make sure that the funding, either through your help or just through itself, is going to cover your project. And then identify anything that could kill that project from actually taking place and cover whatever you can. Now, you want to do this for each of your top 5 accounts. So you should have 25 capital or operational projects across those 5 accounts, which then brings us to step number 7. Measure your success. Now here we want to determine our leading and lagging key performance indicators. So our lagging key performance indicators may be close rate. They may be executed margin percentage. They may be a specific sales goal. And our leading indicators may be how many calls we do or having our operational or capital projects properly defined. So then once we've done that, once we've defined these KPIs that we're going to measure, we need to determine our plans to achieve steps 5, which is create our plan to grow your knowledge, and step 6, create a plan to grow your influence. Now you need to measure and adjust these plans monthly. I know that seems like a lot of work, but it's only 25 projects and you can literally do this in 4 hours once a month. So you could take a morning once a month, maybe in the middle of the month, measure and adjust your plans. Now, what you also want to do is you want to review your KPIs quarterly. Quarterly gives you about a 3-month window. Sometimes you can do it semi-annually. It just depends on how long the runway is on these specific projects. Now, I will tell you, I've seen this exact 7-step, formerly 6-step process done time and time again to successfully grow accounts. The problem is that a lot of folks aren't trained on this and they aren't taught this. So I'm providing that to you right now. I'm giving you this right here, the 7-step process that I promise you, if you apply this, will grow your business. Now it is up to you to go and apply how you use this program, or rather it's up to you to take this program and apply it to you and to use it on your account management processes. So I really appreciate you listening to this episode. I know it's one of the shorter ones, but it still is impactful. I really would encourage you to listen to this as a team or with your sales manager, and I would encourage you to have an open discussion around these 7 steps and see how you can apply them to your business. I guarantee you, if you apply them here in January, when I'm recording this episode, that you will see results by mid-year, and they will be substantial results that will result in business growth if you apply these 7 steps. So I encourage you to do this. I will have a list of these 7 steps at buildingautomationmonthly.com/146. Once again, that is buildingautomationmonthly.com/146. And if you are looking for how to estimate and scope the work that will come out of this 7-step process, then I really encourage you to check out our Building Automation Scoping and Estimating course that will teach you step by step, using a real project and real project documents, how to create a project scope and to create an estimate. This is something that so many sales professionals need but do not have, and we provide all of this in an online, streamlined learning program. And you can find out more about that at buildingautomationmonthly.com/146. Thanks a ton. And I look forward to talking to you next week when we will be going and discussing the topic of building a building automation project. Thanks a ton. Take care.